There is an inevitability of moving from an epic full-on combustion car to a pure electric vehicle. And no matter how incredible that EV might be on paper, we end up losing something both tangible and intangible in the process. And in that regard, I think that the G-wagon is the world's best EV as it stands. And that is a hill that I am today willing to die on, and it's a point that I'm hoping to prove to you today in a number of tests. I'm also going to explain to you how exactly this car works under the skin. And what I'm hoping to prove to you today is that versus the standard G-wagon, this electric G can hit all of those points that you and I care about when it comes to owning a G, even when it comes to residual values and not being bitten on the bum when it comes time to sell a car, because that's the biggest problem with expensive EVs. I'm also going to fill you in on a future family member of this that's coming that I think might be an even better proposition to own. And make sure you stay till the end of the video, where I'm also going to talk about the recent article about the electric G not selling all that well, and I'm going to give you my reaction to it. So guys, let's see whether you agree or disagree with me, and let's find out if the G580 is indeed the best electric vehicle in the world. So as today's episode of RBR is sponsored by Plaud, and this little thing here is the Plaud Notepin, a tiny thumb-sized AI pin that doesn't get in the way and can still capture everything. And the first thing I love is you can wear it in so many different ways. Either you can simply clip it on like I have, or you can let the magnet snap onto your clothes, or we've got other accessories like the wristband and even a lanyard. And all you need to do to begin capturing is one press on the device, the red light will come on, and that's it. No phones, no laptops, no faffing around. And the great thing is it's lightweight, so I forget that it's even there. And it's got a load of storage as well, 64 GB worth, which is the equivalent of something like 7,000 songs. And then it's got great battery life. We're talking continuous use of 20 hours, which imagine for a day's shoot for me is the entire day of talking to experts, etc. Or say back-to-back meetings for you. But then also 40 days just on standby mode, so you don't even need to think about it. But it's not just about note-taking. You can also take photos, you can highlight key areas, you can jot down notes, all without breaking your flow while you're working. And it's not just English, the app can transcribe 112 different languages, and what's amazing is the output that you get. You can either have just a simple transcript, or it can generate summaries, key points, actionable items, and you can choose different summary templates for different things, either meetings or interviews, or create your own. And by far the coolest thing is what's called Ask Plaud, where you can ask it questions from all of your note-taking history. It's like having a PA who's actually been listening to you properly. So pull out your to-do list, look through your previous audio file recordings for information, and rest assured, because all of your data is secured in compliance with both US and EU laws. Now, of course, as an RBR viewer, I've got you a great discount. Use the link below or use the code RBR20 and you will get 20% off these great products. So that's RBR20 for 20% off, all the link below. A huge thanks to Plaud for sponsoring today's episode and supporting RBR, and to you guys for supporting our regular sponsors. Let's get back to the car. So guys, to begin, let us discuss why do EVs become less attractive than their combustion variants in the first place. I think the reason is that all cars are tools for a purpose, and when the electric vehicle falls short of that purpose in our eyes, it becomes immediately less attractive to us. And I think there are three main areas that we care about. One is design, one is performance and ability, and the final one is pricing and residual values or ownership. Let's take design, for example. Mercedes have their EQS, which was a massive failure. Why? Because compared to the beauty and the elegance and the road presence of the phenomenal S-Class, its ICE counterpart, it was just a soap bar. So where the ICE car has reigned in a segment for years because of its beautiful design, the EQS completely ignored this, and because of that failed both on the exterior and in the interior. Then let's look at a great performance car like the GT3 RS. What do you miss when you go to a Taycan Turbo GT? Not to say that the Turbo GT is a bad car, it's phenomenal, but whatever happens, you're going to miss how you control the engine with your fingertips, how you can rev all the way to 9,000, the connection with the gearbox, the roar of the exhaust engine. These are intangible and tangible things that you simply lose. No matter how quick that car can launch off the line, and it can launch damn quick, you will end up missing that element. And what happens? You end up paying a premium just for the fact that it's electric, and the premium can be anything from 20 to 40% on top of what we see as the superior ICE version. And it is in these three disciplines then that I think actually this G580 electric pretty much hits the mark on every single one. Let us start with the first one, which is design, okay? This is the G580, fully electric vehicle, and here is the standard G500, its counterpart. They are absolutely identical, other than a few little aero changes in order to make this slightly more aerodynamic. If I didn't point them out, you wouldn't even know they're there. And of course you have the charger box in the rear, but you can replace that for the standard spare wheel cover as well. And design remaining unchanged is one of the reasons why I think this car will not bite you in the bum as much as other EVs, because the G-Wagon is an iconic piece of historical design. Just like something like a Rolex GMT or a Sub or a Rimowa trunk, it's something that Mercedes have remained closely tethered to over the stronger than time history of this vehicle. And I think it will hold it in good stead versus every single other EV, because we desire this car because it's linked so closely to its heritage. And it's so great that the EV has not gone on a wild and different path. It is still a G-Wagon. And the other great thing is, once this silly Edition 1 expires from all markets, and the reason that it's silly, it's 30k for what is the worst interior I've ever seen in a G-Wagon, with boring grey, electric blue stitching and electric stripes on the side. It is nonsense. Thankfully from now you can actually configure it just like a normal G-Wagon, so you can get any paint option you want, plethora of interiors, the different trim levels, different wheels. In fact, you can even go to manufacturer and get any paint shade you want, get the whole host of interiors they have. Like I said, just like the standard G-Wagon. Just because this is electric, the G580 hasn't changed. It is stronger than time in its design, as a Geländewagen should be. And that's not just on the exterior, which is identical, that's also in the interior. And inside, with the ka-chunk of the doors, you've got your keyless entry with the G logo package now as well. But you look at the structure, it is identical to the combustion version, apart from one area where the differential lock buttons have been replaced with modes specific for the electric G that make it really unique and an even better off-roader. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But yes, everything else is absolutely identical, including your luggage space. For example, I took this G580, as you do, to IKEA. Is it even a press car if you don't take it to IKEA? And I shoved a load of Pax wardrobes in there, which it happily ate with no problem. And you can see the practicality of the G-Wagon remains, as does the interior design, because that is so important alongside the exterior. So it aces the design side of things, and that's no surprise. It's really hard to beat the G-Wagon when it comes to design. Next we come on to performance, which, to be fair, most EVs hit the nail on the head. And the reason for that is mainly the technology. It's so easy to get horsepower and torque. But the G-Wagon has to be good not just in performance and dynamism, but also in off-roading. So let's recap and see whether it can do that or not. First of all, we start with the 116 kilowatt usable battery that actually sits in a really small space because it's still within the traditional ladder chassis of the G-Wagon. Now that battery is dual layered and has multiple cooling measures, partly due to the small space that it sits in. But thanks to it, it's actually more rigid than the standard G as well. It's got an aluminium top and a carbon underguard, and that carbon underguard, as I told you in the last video, is so strong that it can hold 3 G-Wagons while it's sitting on a rock, which is insane. It's also seen rigorous testing in terms of submersion and twisting and turning to make sure that it's completely off-road ready. Then we have the electrical engines, and there are 4, so 1 per wheel, and each engine has a 2-speed gearbox, and it makes 146 HP per wheel and over 290 Newton meters per wheel, giving us over 1160 Newton meters total, and a 0 to 60 of 4.5 seconds, and horsepower pretty much matching the G63 in a car that is 3.2 tons. So that is pretty damn impressive. Now, I did a massive behind the scenes segment in my last video where I get hands-on with both the motors and the chassis, and I really recommend you take a look at that if you want to know a bit more about just what a marvel of engineering this car is. So I'll leave a link for that down below. The final bit of performance is, of course, in motion, which most EVs lose out on. Now, I can't show you that right now, but I will show you when we go out for a drive in a minute. This is not a silent car. It has its own sound, which is called the G-roar. And it's quite an exciting thing actually, because there is a sound that emanates from this car, because there is a sound bar in there, as well as other measures. Mercedes is so good at electric sound now, and I think you're going to like it as much as I like it. So stay tuned for when we go for a drive in a minute. But now I hear you shouting, Raz, what about the range? Because this is the least aerodynamic car in the world. Let's talk about real world range, which is part of the reason I wanted to drive this car again in the UK. Now the WLTP range figure is quoted as 290 miles. We know that WLTP is never accurate, right? Which is part of the reason I wanted to drive this car in the UK. I have, and you can see I'm getting 237 miles, basically 240 miles off a full charge. But the great thing is that this is not a pie in the sky figure that they're giving you and you're actually going to get like 190. No, this has been accurate to the mile with that minimum figure, which I'm so happy about. So it's not like you've seen recently a company in the USA, they know who they are, being sued for pie in the sky. That's not the case here at all. How do we feel about that? I think that's great. Yes, it's not an efficient EV. We know the efficiency figures are crap, but it's a G-wagon. Come on, pull your head out your butts, right? This is a tool for a purpose, as we said, and all G-wagons are inefficient vis-a-vis the shape, the size, and the weight. But in terms of range, I think that's fine. I owned two Taycans. This was on par with the old Taycan, which would be around about 200 miles, you know, just over if you're lucky in the summer. It's on par with like Rolls-Royce Spectre. I think that's absolutely fine. But it's actually not the end of the story when it comes to battery with this car. In terms of charging, you charge either between up to 11 kilowatts or you go all the way up to 200 kilowatts on a faster charger. Yes, it's not as quick as some cars, but I think it's going to be absolutely fine in that regard. What's cool is when you're charging, you do get an affirmation noise, which is great, which ties along nicely with the whole G-roar and the general presence that you have on this car with the noise that it emanates. Now, the story on batteries doesn't end there. Mercedes' Chief Technology Officer, Markus Schäfer, has said shortly after this car came out that another battery option would be available within the next 2 years for particularly the G-Class, which boasts a new cell chemistry that sees a 40% increase in the usable energy. So they are saying around about 20 to 40%. If it was 20, you're going to get something around about 140 kilowatt usable. If it goes to 40, we're talking up to 160 kilowatt, which would give you, I think in real world, genuinely around about 400 miles in an electric G, which would be really quite game changing. But then this does highlight one of those things that you and I get scared of with EVs, right? Where this is the worst that it's ever going to be and it's only going to get better. So do you wait? Then the final bit of performance and ability, which is off-roading, and it has to be at G level. And the G team wanted it to be as good, if not better. And they've essentially achieved a car that is even better than the standard G. How have they done that? Well, every single normal metric when it comes to off-roading in terms of approach angle, etc., is either the same or better. Its wading depth is actually higher, so it can get even lower in water, thanks to the technology that this is based on. But then it goes beyond that, because yes, it hasn't got the differential locks, but what it does have is complete control over each wheel. And that's allowed Mercedes to create some modes that I'm sure you guys have seen. And let's talk about these very specific modes that you only get in the electric G. Now the 3 off-road modes. As I said, they replace the differential lock buttons in the middle here, and they're so awesome. The first one that everybody knows about is the G-turn, where you have 2 of the motors running in opposite directions, and it allows you for this awesome spin to be done. And it's better to do it on like loose terrain and stuff. Yes, I know no one's going to do it, but it's such a talking point with this car. And it's one of the things where you can see the mindset of the G engineers, that they love to have fun with these cars. So I'm so glad that exists. Now the more useful ones, the first one is G steering, which again you would see in my previous video when we took it off-roading, essentially allowing you to do extremely quick maneuvers while off-roading, almost like mini drifts, in order to make the off-roading element even better when it comes to shorter and sharper turns. And the other one is off-road crawl, which I term it as almost like cruise control for off-roading, where you don't even need the knowledge of low range, etc. You just pop it on and the car will just crawl and get to where it needs to go using the intelligence of the motors in the system here. So like I said, in almost every measurable area, this is as good, if not a better off-roader than the original. So as a tool for a purpose, really achieving its goal. Now, what I think might be the biggest topic and where most other EVs are going to falter, and that is value for money. And you're looking at me weird because this is an expensive car, but so is the G-wagon. But this is where the G580 quietly drops the mic, okay? Now, there is usually a big bump, as I said, when you go from combustion to ICE. For example, look at the Q5 versus the Q6, about an 18% price increase. You look at the A6 e-tron, about 23%. You go to something like the new Macan, it's 22%. You go from the 5 Series to the i5, it's a whopping 30%. You go from the G500 to the G580, it's only 4%. There's 6 grand between them, which is pretty much unheard of, particularly when you think of the fact that our G580 matches the G63 in terms of horsepower and certainly in terms of 0 to 60, which is a better yardstick for us to measure with. To me, that's not just surprising, that is genuinely disruptive. And that's before we even take into account things like running costs, etc. Like, the worst thing about owning a G-wagon, and I've owned so many of them, is how much fuel you end up putting into the damn thing just to use it normally. Whereas this, you know, maximum I'll be paying £30 per full charge at home. And if you're on a better tariff, that's say cheaper overnight, then that story only gets better. But that's just a small point. The big point is residual values. The reason that you and I hate expensive EVs, especially, look how they tank. The market recently has been brutal. You guys will have probably seen my video on the Taycan, how that, despite being the best of EVs, has seen a massive 50 to 60% drop on some models in the first year, which is insane. Now, with this, I think you're in for the best chance of that not happening. A, thanks to the pricing strategy, B, thanks to the heritage of this thing, because it's so desirable to you and I. G-wagons are built different generally when it comes to residual value, and I'm hoping, apart from this silly edition one, that the standard G580 will give us the best chance of owning an expensive EV without that horrible drop in residuals. Now, I promised to tell you about a car that takes all of these points and might be even better because it'll probably be half the price. Yes, you've already guessed it. I'm talking about the baby G-wagon, or the little G, as Mercedes have been calling it recently. And it's such a cute branding that they've been using, because it's literally a small caps lock G, which I think is just adorable. But this is not some small cutesy car. Mercedes are going to fully leverage their heritage with G-wagon to make a proper sibling to this car, to sit underneath it. I think it's going to be based on their MMA platform, so their modular architecture shared with, say, the new CLA. But because it's a modular architecture, it's going to share the design, I think, of the bigger car. So everything that we love about the design of the G-wagon, but then be 800 volt in terms of the EV, and have all of the benefit of MB.OS, the new OS in there. And potentially, because it's on the modular architecture, you could have ICE variants. I mean, how cool would an AMG V8 be in a car like that? And it's not years away. They are working on that car as we speak. And like I said, at probably half the price of a normal G-wagon, to then battle the Defender and the Bronco, etc. These are exciting times for G fans. But then I'll probably give you another reason not to consider this one. But I think you really should consider this one. And the final thing that we need to discover together is, how does it drive? Does it have that element of G that we crave from the driving experience? Let's find out right now. Now, to begin, this G isn't silent, nor is it emotionless. We have a startup sound, we have an ending sound, but the best bit is everything in between, and that is the G roar. Let's put it into sport mode, and that's where you're going to hear it the most. Listen to that. Just listen to it. It perfectly mimics a multi-cylinder large engine. I think more G500 than AMG, but it's exciting enough to keep even an AMG addict like me very, very happy behind the wheel. I really love this sound. And look, this is so important because every G throughout history has had distinctive and memorable engine notes. Even the diesels of old felt like powerful old trucks. And then what the G roar does, it somehow blends those legacies into something all new but very familiar. And the key thing here is, in most EVs, I've said to you guys when driving them, even something like the Taycan, I would stay in the standard comfort mode because it's always fast enough, always dynamic enough, and there's not enough difference going into the other modes, where you just end up finding a car that is faster. The key thing with this car is I want to be in sport mode just so I can hear the G roar. And look, you could turn it off, but to me, this will make G-wagon customers and performance car customers happy. And to me, it's 90% of the battle won, even at this point, because where most other EVs fall flat, the G-wagon roars. Now, what's nice is when you slow down and then you pick up pace again, that's when you hear it most, much like, you know, a modern V8. And then even when you come to a standstill, you get that strong pulsation coming out of the car, as we saw earlier. Now, you go into comfort, and that sound subdues, as you would expect it to, which is good. So you have the choice between those, and I found that both modes adequately translate your inputs, albeit at different levels of aggression, as you would expect as well. I'm glad I got to drive it in the UK though, because the perfect roads in France didn't really show the full character of this versus the standard G. I do feel the weight in this, and you do feel those clever 4 electric motors fighting against each other, and the ESP light flashing whenever you're trying to come out of a corner. It's very common actually. But even though it still feels like you're wrangling a beast, that is the typical G characteristic of handling. So again, it's true to that side of the car. So yes, undoubtedly, body roll is present, steering is light. These are all part of the typical G characteristics. You really have to, you know, like I said, wrangle the beast in order to get it to go where you want to. And it is a matter of taming it. But all of this is familiar, and it's what I want as a G driver as well. It's what I expect. One great thing that you won't find in all EVs is the recuperation modes here, where you control them with the paddles, but they're more like shifting gears. So you have 4 recuperation modes, all from straight up coasting to what almost feels like one pedal driving in maximum. So then the result of that is you almost get into this very familiar, almost like you're downshifting when coming into a corner, putting the power down and then upshifting back to allow it to kind of coast down. And it's nice, it's a familiar feeling. The recuperation is powerful, particularly in the maximum level, as we see coming into this corner here. And then you shoot out, ESP lights go crazy. Now, speaking of reaction speed and pace, particularly, let's talk about the speed, because much heavier car, etc. Yes, same horsepower as the AMG, but what is the actual speed? Let's launch it just from standstill. There's no launch control though, so bear that in mind. Okay, loads of torque, gets it going fast. And there we go, 4.39 seconds on launch, which matches what we found in France, and again, matches the previous G63 for pure speed. So in that regard, so much bang for buck in terms of pure price versus the much slower 500 and 450. But the really cool thing is, unlike the G63, where when you put the power down, you're almost got this tug of war between the 2 axles, or particularly the front wheels when you're shooting off, and G63 owners will know exactly what I'm talking about. This car puts down the power without any drama, effortlessly, and it's thanks to the communication between those 4 clever electric engines. So then you're not left being able not to take advantage of situations when driving, much like in other EVs, and indeed in something like the G63. So all very familiar territory. So all of this very familiar G-wagon performance to me. The speed reminds me of G63, handling reminds me of G500. Though if you compared it to the brand new G63 with the active suspension, that would eat this car alive on any road. That car feels too dynamic versus this. And that's perhaps what the electric G is missing at the moment. One, in terms of design, but also in terms of dynamism. What we're wanting, I think, is maybe an AMG version of this with that active suspension, a bit more power, aggressive looks, a different soundtrack. But they must make sure, if they do it, not to price it close to the original, because I don't think that will convince us. So to bring it all home, the G580 doesn't just look like a G-wagon, it lives like one. It gives us the character, the presence, and even the flaws that we love about the original. It's the first EV I've driven that hasn't made me mourn the combustion version in some way that I would then be disinterested in buying it. Much the opposite. I think I'd quite like a green over tan version of this car to own myself one day. And for all these reasons, I think it is the world's best EV. Not because it's the fastest or the most efficient, it's not, but because it's the only one that has truly accepted and understood its purpose, just like all the great G-wagons of the past have. And hopefully it's the one that won't sting our wallet as well. And this is just the beginning. With those new batteries coming, with the little G coming on the horizon as well, I think this is the one product team at Mercedes-Benz who are truly ahead of the curve. So guys, oh, wait a second, time out. I got a rare epilogue for you guys today. I filmed that video at the first quarter of this year, okay? And straight after I filmed it, this news article came out where some unnamed Mercedes executives said that these electric Gs are sitting at dealers like lead and they're not selling. And even though this came after I filmed it, I feel it's remiss of me not to directly tackle what this article was saying. So basically this article said that out of total G-Wagon sales that year, which was probably not even a year's worth of electric G sales, only 15% accounted for the electric cars versus all the other combustion variants, which, as it sounds, doesn't sound like it's selling very well. But you and I covered one of the main reasons at the start of this video, that the only one you could get up until that point was the Edition 1, which is a horrible edition with a crap interior, and you have no choice like a G-Wagon customer normally would. And only recently have we had the ability to now spec a G580 to our own liking with the paint and the interior we want, and 30 grand less than that horrible Edition 1. So to give such a comment so early on, to me, seems really premature. Now, yes, it may well be the case that that car isn't selling as well as we'd like, because we've seen generally, especially the German manufacturers, pulling away from EVs due to customer feedback from people like me and you that actually we want more ICE and hybrid cars. And that's fine. But I'd still love to see the figures a year from now and see the G580 versus the G500 and the diesel, not the AMG. You cannot compare the sales of the electric one to the AMG. The AMG's got its own fan base. It's an absolute icon, and no AMG customer is going to be looking at the 580 to replace it. And look, at the end of this, we are still going to get a baby G. Maybe because of this whole thing, we'll end up getting like a V8 one like I was hoping, which would be awesome. And like the spokesperson for G-Wagon said, look, if customers will get whatever they want. So look, it's a big win. And while I still think that this is the best EV in terms of living up to the original, these days, we don't seem to be interested in EVs, even if they are really good at the job they do. So does it even matter whether this is the best one or not? That is a question I want you guys to answer. A huge thanks for watching, as always, and I'll see you guys next time on RBR.